or what is one thing I think everyone should learn at a young age? Respect and discipline. Discipline. Moreover, discipline. You have to have discipline when it doesn't matter in life what you're doing. It could be in combat, it could be a stressful situation. The discipline, your routine, the making of your bed every day, right? Like the working out, the eating a healthy diet, the discipline of having a routine, having a schedule and sticking to it gives you the ability to fall back on something when something goes wrong, right? Like imagine you're in a foreign country on a military patrol and your job is to walk from street A to street B. That's your mission. But if someone shoots at you between the two, you have to shoot back. But you still have to complete the mission. So you have to have the discipline to know something happened, let's fix it, and let's finish what we're doing. Without the discipline, without the groundingness of the discipline, nothing else will work. Period. What do I think the biggest issue facing humanity is today? The problem with humanity is we forgot to be human beings. We forgot that each and every living human being as a person has feelings, has emotions, has a family, and that it's more important to work together, and we'll call it a utopia, if you will, right? Like we forgot that if you don't have what you need and I don't have what I need, that the world doesn't go around, because without a team, without humanity, it doesn't work. I think we forgot to reach out and lend a hand. We forgot to use manners. We've forgotten to open up doors for people. We've forgotten to respect the elderly, the women and the children.
What role do you think the government should play in people's lives?
The government is a unique beast. The government has left and right lateral limits. And if you really look back, our founding fathers really had a good, strong idea of what they wanted our country to be. If you read the Federalist Papers, the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, for example, it talks about how 435 people should be United States representatives split across the population. And verbatim, it talks about how they want it to be farmers and small business owners that come from their community to make decisions, and then after a few years move back to their community. The government as a whole has overstepped its boundaries, yet doesn't give enough at the same time, if that makes sense. I don't know how many decades it's been since the United States House of Representatives has yet to pass a budget. Now, if you don't pass your house budget, or you don't pay your county taxes, or you don't maintain your household budget, you lose everything. But we have career politicians that are not capable of reaching across the table, being a human being, shaking the hand and agreeing with someone. They would rather argue and talk down to them. The government's job is to provide a security net for our country. The government's job is to provide us with the services that we need. The government, see, a lot of people get it confused too. They're like, oh, well, you have your taxes pay for school, your taxes pay for fire, your taxes pay for police department. So you're not really a democracy, you're socialism. Wrong. That's not how it works. We're a capitalist society. But we flip-flopped the government. Somewhere we believed that the people in office are in power, and really the people are the ones in power, and we need to remember that. My proudest moment from serving in the military. To hope that I made an impact to the good? I don't know. Probably I would say for me personally was standing in the auditorium on Parris Island on Family Day after we did the motivational run, and my senior drill instructor handing me my EGA, which makes you a Marine, in a boot camp. And I earned a title Marine. That was enough.
Why are so many veterans discouraged when they leave the military lately?
Well, I don't want to say veterans discouraged lately, because over the last 5 to 10 years, we haven't really been at war. So the veterans getting out, majority are first term, 4 years, they do 4 years, they get in, they get out. They're discouraged because likely they joined thinking that the generation before them went to 2 wars, so that they're going to deploy and they're going to do all these, what the youngins think is cool things, because a lot of people think war is cool till you go to it. There's a distinction between a combat veteran and a veteran. And you'll notice that because a combat veteran says war is stupid, and a veteran says I want to go to war. I think that combat veterans are disgruntled because, again, our government has forgotten its purpose. And it's to take care of the people. Look at the turmoil and waste that we've left behind in foreign countries, How many of us had linguists like myself in Afghanistan that we rescued because of bad policy making? When you fight in two wars, and remember, we fought in two different wars, some of us, during the same time period, with two different sets of rules, two different sets of enemies, two different terrain, everything is different. And there, you and I rely on each other. It doesn't matter if you're going to come home and fuck prostitutes and blow lines of cocaine. When we're in country, we have to rely on each other. It doesn't matter what right? You are my brother in arms. When I come home, you can do whatever you want, but when I'm there, you and I have to be a team together. And we understood that. The biggest struggle that veterans face, especially combat veterans face today, is the lack of camaraderie and the lack of fellowship with other people that have similar experiences. If you can't comprehend what I'm telling you, how am I supposed to vent to you? If you've never been shot at or had an ID go off, how am I supposed to relate that to you? And we have a problem because we're not joining the American Legions, we're not joining the VFWs, and that was designed to reduce the 22 veteran suicide a day, right? Like those are veteran organizations literally designed to put veterans in a room together to share experiences and help each other. But we don't do that. We have forgotten. So I think it's important to go back to the roots. You know, when you're done serving your country, you have to come back and serve your community. Teach what you've learned. But you have to have a community that's willing to accept that. Where I live, outside of Camp Lejeune, it's the biggest base on the East Coast. And there is the worst relationship between the local government, the population, and the military that I've seen in the world. It's disgusting. That's why we started an American Legion Post 556 to try to bring the camaraderie back and make the community understand what the veteran population has to offer. It is just as much the veteran's responsibility because you have to think about it. Some of us are experienced combat leaders. And I can't sit here and complain and say the community and the veterans don't work together to build a relationship and mentor each other if I'm not doing that, if I'm not reaching out and trying to make my community better, right? Like, it goes hand in hand.
Do you think the United States citizens had a right to learn about mass surveillance?
Your question is not accurate.
What would you phrase the question as?
Executive Order 12333. During a congressional debate, actually, I had to keep my mouth shut because of my old job as a counter-intel agent. I know things that most people don't know. My systems and my rules and my laws were different. So first of all, let's get a couple things straight. So the NSA would be the only government agency the United States government has. It's a spy agency, right? The Central Intelligence Agency has case officers that pay people to spy. The NSA spies, right? They take digital information. In order to obtain information on a U.S. citizen, you must follow Executive Order 12333, and it lists exactly what you can do that for if you're looking to get a security clearance. If there is a threat that you pose or because of your job, right? So no one's listening in on me on my phone. No one gives two shits. You understand? I had a top secret SCI clearance and I'm worthless to the Russians and the Chinese, right? Because the second I didn't have access to it, my information was outdated. It means nothing. There was, at one point in time, the potential for programs to where if you were communicating and using keywords like key terrorist words, they would be an indicator, right?
Where does that information get sent to? Like if someone used one of those keywords in a text or email, like,
so it goes into an algorithm, right?
How does that get captured, that information?
No different than why, when we're done talking, is your phone going to say the same thing? Yeah. There's a very fine line, don't get me wrong, between personal information and what the government should have access to. And I can tell you firsthand from trying to get information from a foreigner's telecommunications, to get that from that type of environment is difficult. for a U.S. citizen, the second you type their phone number or their name, the flags that appear are unreal. It is one of the most regulated things there are, one of the most classified things there are, and I assure you, you should be more concerned about Google and Facebook than you should the United States government, because, well, I don't know if you watch news lately, but we're a bunch of idiots. But big companies, they want your info.
What's something that brought you great joy in life?
Saving people's lives. Finding IEDs, interrogating people. Coming home from a deployment. One time me and my partner found like a 700 kilogram IED that was under covert designed to kill us because they knew that we were the two intel collectors schwacking everybody. But we found it before them. We blew it the fuck up. That's pretty cool. So I had a linguist in Afghanistan. They call it a Cat 1 linguist. So he had a top secret clearance so that he could work with me. He was original Afghani, and his father was high up in the government, and he knew English, so he was translating for the Americans. He eventually worked his way to America, joined the Army, became a translator for the Army, and after 2 years of doing special forces raids, was hurt. Go figure, back injury. Medically retired. So he came back as a contractor, and when I had him in 2013, he'd already been in country for a couple of years. He sent me a video of the Abbey Gate of the Talibs smacking the shit out of people and holding them hostage as they were bombing the last flights going out. And he's like, can you please help me? Because he's a U.S. citizen, right? Therefore, his wife is a U.S. citizen, right? And his children get citizenship. And they couldn't get him out of the country, so I started working with him. I'm like, okay, what embassy assets do we have in the country? And this is in Bagram. They shut down the Kabul embassy. They'd already done the knee of the embassy evacuation. And we're like, well, what are we going to do now? So I called my old team up, and my old officer in charge, Joe Siragusa, he was like, hey, one of the guys on the MEU that's out there now was actually our logistics officer on your MEU. Let's get a hold of him, because there was some Marines on the deck as they were closing on the airfield. I forgot, I think it was the Indian embassy actually that we ended up using, but he sent me all of his passport, all of their credentials, all of their information. He was on the last U.S. aircraft to leave that country. The last Air Force plane to leave that country. Him, his wife, and 2 kids. And I used when I was talking to someone that gave me information on the presidential elections when Karzai didn't make it. Use my language I used. For more than a decade, he helped out the U.S. government, and we were going to let him die.
Is that just through bad policy, or there's just too many, like it happens so fast, or?
Well, as we talked about earlier, bad policy making. I don't care, Republican, Democrat, it doesn't, your political affiliation means nothing to me. You're a bunch of idiots. You can't pass a defense budget. You can't agree on anything. You shut down an airfield. Now, how do you win a war? You take over an airfield. If you don't have control of the airfield, you lose a war. It's that cut and dry. That's the whole purpose of the Ranger Regiment. Take airfields. Did you know that? The Rangers are not special forces, but they're very highly trained infantry, and their sole purpose in life is to take an airfield. So you can land aircraft. And you can bring Marines in to kill everybody and the Army to maintain it, right? Because the concept is Marines go and take it, the Army then maintains it, right? And the Air Force lifts things in, and the Navy takes care of the water. But when you let those strategic placements go.
There's 2 photos I remember from, I think it was your first deployment. One is you with a little Iraqi boy, and the other one was you and one of your officers or someone, another Marine, sitting on Saddam Hussein's throne. Can you tell me a little bit about those 2 photos?
Yeah, so the kid was we were on a patrol through town, and you give them candy, they get all excited and stuff. In Saddam's palace, I had gone and flown into Baghdad. Oh my God, you want to talk about a nightmare? It took me like days to fly into Baghdad. Moving around in a wartime is tough in the desert, because when you don't have the ability to fly, you don't go very far because you don't want to drive on a bomb. We went to it was the first Iraqi Army Sergeant Major's Symposium, right? So sergeant major, highest enlisted rank. They brought all of them together to Baghdad, and then they brought the U.S. Army, the head of the U.S. Army sergeant major, right? Sergeant major, excuse me, the U.S. Army, to train all these senior enlisted advisors. And the first time they ever done it. It's pretty neat. It was like sitting in the UN headquarters because everyone had earphones in, right? And the translators were so good that as you talked, in whatever language you talked, I heard it in English in my ear, right? And it's pretty neat because I was staying with they're like dads, like 60, 70-year-old dudes that were like part of like the Ba'ath Party, right? Like they were the ones fighting us in the first Gulf War and then they were like, fuck this. And we're gonna hang out with the Americans, right? But you'd hear stories about them, like how they were killing us. But it's pretty neat. Yeah, so that was in Saddam's palace. So that was the head of multinational forces west, Iraq. It was right outside the green zone. So it was in Saddam's palace, and that was his famous chair. So that sergeant major that's in the picture with me, he was the senior enlisted advisor for that base. He was a Marine sergeant major. So when I went out there, one of my friends, Franny Gotch, was a PAO on that base, so she hooked me up with him, and I had to take the picture. But yep, that was during the first ever Iraqi Army Sergeants Major Symposium. And I mean, there's dignitaries from all across the world there. And essentially what they did is they showed off what they've learned over the last X amount of years of us training them. And then...
What are your thoughts on aliens?
Aliens? Fuck's an alien?
Something that did not originate on this planet.
We didn't.
Within its own lifetime, say.
We didn't.
Oh. Yeah, if you go back far enough.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, within its own lifetime, it started on, say, another planet.
I'll tell you what, you let me go to space and I'll give you that answer. You find me way up there and I'll find out. It's mysterious up there. Always wanted to go. Who knows? Never say never. There's nothing on any classified computers if that's what you're asking about aliens.
None that you had access to.